Welcome back, pod people, to another very special documentary month episode where we are discussing Dear Zachary. I believe it's from 2008 by Kuenne, I think. I don't know. I don't know how you say his last name.
Close enough.
Oh, I'm sure I'm butchering it. I knew that I wanted to do this movie for a while, and this is actually the movie that I was having a hard time deciding if it should be true crime or if I should do documentary. And ultimately, I was like excited to talk about Killers of the Flower Moon, so that's the route I went for true crime.
Yeah.
And we'll break that cycle next week. Our next documentary is not a true crime. At least I don't think so. I didn't watch the documentary yet.
There's hidden true crime in there.
There might be. I mean, this documentary in particular, Dear Zachary, it changes like 3 times in the middle of the documentary what the fuck it's about.
The characters that you think are going to be there at the end are not. It's like, I was talking to this guy. And then at the end,
yeah,
I was not talking to them anymore.
I decided to talk to these people instead. Oh, God. Yeah, it is something that I watched back in the day when we worked at Hollywood Video, and I wasn't actually prepared for this movie at all. It is easily the most depressing movie of all time, and it's not depressing from beginning to end, but when it is depressing, it's like a full 10 at depressing. And one of the reasons that I wanted to discuss this movie in particular was because we had a Canadian host who's no longer on the show, and I thought, what better documentary than one that ties the Pittsburgh area to Canada? There's probably not a better one. I mean, you could talk about jumping from, Canada into the United States in your Canadian documentary, but it's not as impactful as this, I don't think.
This is a good movie to show that Canadians can be the bad guys sometimes, too.
Yeah. Even when they mean well. Yeah, because there's a lot of villains in this movie. It's not just one person, it's several. It's basically the system, the Canadian system. Does it work? Not in 2001, it didn't work.
No.
Through 2003, the duration of when this took place. But yeah, it's based around a murder that happens in Lancaster. Lancaster.
Where are you getting Lancaster?
Oh, Latrobe. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I shouldn't be doing this. Yeah, Latrobe, not Lancaster. I just think I really wanted to say it both ways so people knew that there was 2 different ways to say it. Yeah, Latrobe, and it's about this guy who's a documentary filmmaker or just loves to make movies with his friend. I guess his fortunate opportunity to make a film arises because his best friend gets murdered, and that's kind of where this documentary initially starts. And it's just fucking wild. Like, it kind of starts off very nice with everybody talking about him, and then they kind of get away from what we're used to in the Datelines, where, I mean, everybody has pretty good things to say about him, but they're not afraid to talk about the embarrassing things about this guy either. And they have footage of him from, I don't know, hundreds of people that probably also doesn't paint him in the best light, but makes him human and maybe relatable. Yeah, I don't know if you felt that.
I like the footage of him being in like all those home movies, like because it seems like they made a ton of them when he was kids when they were in California. It made me think of your stuff that you had your dad do that one time when it's like, and then we got his parents in, and the dad's like, "Listen here, you son of a bitch." And I was like, that's exactly what Justin did with his dad.
I had to. You run out of people. You're like, who do I know that's the right age? My dad.
I just need some guy to play angry.
Yeah, the gentleman, Andrew Bagby, that passes away, is murdered. His parents, that are throughout this entire documentary, look like they're in their late 80s all the time. From these childhood videos up until 2006, I think is how far this documentary goes.
Yeah, I think so.
There's even on YouTube, there's like an epilogue that he made a few years later that's 14 minutes long that just goes over like the aftermath of this movie that's kind of interesting. And you could probably watch them together since the movie's only an hour and a half or a few minutes longer than that. But yeah, this movie is a great movie to throw in if you have your friends over and you're like, you just want to watch a movie? I've done that before, and they're like, damn, Justin, that was a fucked up movie. And I'm like, well, it was interesting, right? It had those local ties for us. All that footage. I'm like, I think what is maybe the most memorable about this movie is it feels to be driven by emotion, if that makes any sense, because a lot of the clips, even these people that we see, they're only seconds, if that. They go through them so fast. And unlike our movie last week, The Thin Blue Line, they fucking tell you who everybody is, like as if that's going to help you keep track of how many people do you think they interview? Over 100.
There's a lot.
There's easily over 100 people there's people that they probably sat down and they talked to for hours, and they only are just like, he was a good guy. That's it. That's the only part that got into the movie.
Probably.
And this is another movie that got covered by our favorite show, Dateline, and by our favorite Canadian, Keith Morrison. I'm sure they didn't do it as good of justice as this. They probably couldn't have all that beautiful language, like you were saying, that we get to hear throughout.
Yeah, this guy's just a totally normal guy, becomes a doctor, and then everyone keeps talking about how he's from California, and then he settled in Latrobe, and he was like, Latrobe's the greatest city I've ever been in, which I feel like people in Southwest PA would be like, Latrobe? It's all right.
They would.
But he's like, no, it's great. Like, it's a small town, and I could just be a doctor and help people till he meets Shirley, who's a weirdo.
Shirley is hilarious.
It's funny, too, because even before people start, like, at first they're just going, oh, yeah, he met Shirley, and I guess they were dating. And while they're playing all that footage of her, she just seems so awkward and weird. Like, you can tell she is older than him. I think she's, like, 13 years older than him or something.
Yeah.
She's, like, in her 40s, and he's 28. And it's just, everything about their whole relationship looks super awkward. Anytime there's video of the two of them together, she just seems like there's something wrong with her very clearly. Like, she doesn't understand how to be around people.
I like that, there's that 12-year difference, and then they keep saying, her friends are like, how's it dating grandma? She's only not that much older.
She has an interview with the cops, and she's like, well, I have 3 different children, and they all have different last names. I've been divorced twice. It's like, well, that sounds like a problem.
Another amazing thing is this murder happens in 2001, and they're able to track so much information through just her cell phone and where she's at. Within 14 minutes of this movie, if not less, she's very clearly the person that murdered this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's all very kind of ordinary up until that moment, because there's like there's so much audio recordings, like from the police, and we'll discuss the rest later, but this documentary has a lot of great stuff. At least, like, it can keep it interesting with the interviews and all the footage of them making films together. I feel like everyone had a fucking camera. Did you like how this director inserts himself so much into this? I mean, it is personal.
Yeah, I think he had to. He doesn't get like too much in, like he does it. Very clearly, he's narrating it, so when he's like, "Well, this is what I was doing, and this is how I felt." Like, yeah, it is definitely more subjective than most documentaries. And I do like how you're saying, he interviews like hundreds of people, and then towards the end, there's like that one person that goes like, well, who's interviewing you? Like, how are you? Who's gonna get your story or something? But he just like kind of lays it out throughout the entire movie. So I think sometimes, yeah, I don't think there was a way to make this movie that he wasn't like that personally attached to. Like, I don't think he could have done it and referred to this guy as like, oh, this man Andrew, like he says like, oh, my friend. And he knew
it's
the
that
parents,
personal
like
element.
He said they were like best friends, and they would always stay at the parents' house when they were kids. So it's like, yeah, I just don't think it's possible to make it without him being so much into it.
And I think for his narration, and as much as he brings up, he lets a lot of other people talk. It's like, here are the facts, here's how it's changed the story, and here's where we're going from there. He doesn't really go too much into more than they'd made films together. He doesn't
Yeah.
make it too much about himself. Which, hell, even Errol Morris was speaking in his... I mean, it was the end, but he did.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to.
I just think it's wild. Like, the whole story is really wild that it starts, like you said, Shirley Turner comes into his life. They did some sort of med school together in Canada. She just seems to be kind of like a little psychotic, and she followed him essentially back. And like everyone says that knows him, that she just kind of showed up and was everywhere. And then he tries to end things, and you're like hearing from other people that are like, Andrew, this woman's not normal. You gotta call the police. Like, there's a moment where they said that he drove her to the Arnold Palmer Airport. She flew home to where she was at a time, Iowa, I believe, and then drove 16 hours straight back to the house.
Yeah.
And they're like, I would have went out the back door and called the cops. I like this buddy at his resident doctor friend that's like, don't meet her anywhere alone. And it's like, what does he do? He meets her alone. I'm like, did he really tell him not to meet her alone? That just seems like a very specific thing, but
It is kind of weird. They had that. There's like another great moment where they talk about. Well, everyone in the movie keeps referencing that, like, oh, I wanted him to be my best man. Like, he needed to be the best man at my wedding. And then she was mad that he didn't invite her to his one friend's wedding. But then I guess that other wedding, they said he had already technically invited her like months before they broke up or something. So I guess she took that to be like, you already invited me. You can't take it back. Like, I'm showing up. And then that's another one of those moments where there's like super weird video of them together where they're like on the dance floor and she's like climbing on top of him.
yeah, she's like dancing into other people.
Yeah, but it's like yeah, there's like at this point there's very clearly something wrong with this. She's got something going on.
Yeah. Well, they're like, well, he was murdered, and they do the photo reveal of like dissolving her back into the photo. And yeah, she just seems strange and out there. And it's like, he was supposed to meet his friend after work, and the guy's like, Andrew's never late. I kept checking every like a couple hours. Then I went to work, and he didn't show up at work. Then we heard from the police that they found a dead guy in scrubs, and we just knew. And how personal it was. Like, she shot him in like the ass and like, I don't know, stomped on his head or something. There's trauma to his head, skull. And then goes back to the parents, and they have to fly all the way in to Pittsburgh and drive all the way to Greensburg, identify him. That story is just horrific, from his mother saying that like she kissed him too hard. So like the packing that they had in his face for the bullet wound like popped back out. So they had to like pick it up and shove it back in his face. I'm like, that gives you a good idea of the documentary you're about to get into. I mean, there's even a bit where they talk about his uncle that had cancer and died, and I'm like, I don't even know if they needed that in the movie.
You got to get to at least an hour and a half runtime, so you gotta fill a little bit in.
Yeah.
It just adds to the tragedy.
If you didn't have seconds, like half a second of every interview, and he just let people speak a little bit, maybe he thought it'd be too boring or something. But it does. It feels like a memory. Like, it almost feels like you're remembering this guy with how quick that it's just showing this footage of him joking around and being funny and hating on himself. He hates himself. Or that was like another thing where he's like, I'm ugly. Shirley's the best I can do. And then people were like, nobody might be better than Shirley.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people were like oblivious to Shirley, though. Like, they didn't see anything wrong with her. I thought she was kind of fun, and I really wasn't expecting that from her.
Somebody must have. We never get like any interviews with Shirley's family other than one of her kids that at the end of the movie that's at the like one of the press conferences or something, and he's saying like, yeah, my mom very clearly had some problems, because that's what I was wondering too. I was like, well, where are all these kids? Because she seems to just like go around wherever she wants, and then she runs off to Canada, and it's like, yeah.
I think she said they had 3, and they were like basically adults, or they made it sound like they were maybe not much younger than Andrew was. But yeah, they suspect her of murder. They have the casings. They have live rounds. They know that her gun specifically malfunctioned and ejected live rounds. So it wasn't just the casings. And it's like, it's very specifically your gun. It kind of that typical thing, like if you do watch a lot of murder mystery type shows where it's like, oh, yeah, I did just get a gun for protection, and I don't know where it's at, and then her story has to change because of like where her cell phone was like picking her up. There was like one weird thing where they're like she checked her email or something in his house. I don't even, was that after she killed him, or like, you know,
the story of like, okay, can we see that gun? And it's like, it's either in my room or in my closet or maybe in my car. And it's like, I feel like you should really know where that thing's at.
Or maybe Andrew borrowed it. Yeah, I think that's what it was. Like, thought about that way after the fact, where she could have just easily said, I left my gun there by accident or something. Nope, she didn't think it through. But yeah, she flees back to Canada. They're trying to bring her back to the States, you know, through this premeditated murder case. She's fucking pregnant with his kid, which is weirdly, like, I don't want to say miraculous, but for her age, it's kind of impressive. They're just talking about like how slow the court system is in Canada, and that there were times where like the judge talked for 5 minutes and like adjourned things until, you know, like 2 months later. Before you know it, she has this fucking kid. Nothing's happened yet, and the grandparents that are trying to start like a legal thing to get custody of this kid decides to go to Canada, where they think they'd have a better chance of just being around the kid and dealing with her as directly as possible. And I think that's where this documentary gets really interesting, is because there's this weird custody battle thing happening with this woman that killed their son, and they're forced to spend time with this woman. And it is literally the epitome of hell, living like a living hell, I would say, where they fucking know that she killed him, and they have to talk to her every fucking day, and they have to see her. And even when she's in prison for a while, they have to talk to her daily, and they have to see her weekly. And it's just like what they said, that drive to the penitentiary or whatever was 2 hours away. Yeah. What the fuck? Like, it's just so awful, which, I mean, I guess that's the point. I think the point of the documentary is it needed to be this awful because it had something to say and it needed to change things. Yeah. And then they have all these recordings of her too, because they were doing this custody battle, so they essentially wanted to, you know, catch her if she said anything crazy and use that in their case. And what we find out in like later in the film is that they've had her saying all kind of crazy shit, you know, not to the Andrew's parents, but to like counselors and all types of people in the prisons, just like had her on suicide watch and all crazy ass shit. The crazy part is, yeah, she murdered their son. She's not tried for it yet, so we'll say she's charged for it, and she's still allowed to have access to her kid, and she's in close proximity of Andrew's parents. I guess they're not married, so it wouldn't be in-laws, but you feel like their life's in danger the entire time that they're out there. Now, I don't know what you would think if you would suspect that she would be a danger to the kid, but this documentary shifts once this kid's born, and instead of being a documentary about the case, it shifts into the documentarian Kurt wanting to interview all these family members and have them talk about the life of Andrew for his son Zachary. Hence the title.
Yeah, he's making like a time capsule.
That's cool. If I was in the same boat, I think that would be a pretty cool thing to do for somebody's kid in a case like that, where you assume that they're basically not growing up with either of their parents. their dad's dead and their mom's going to be in jail. That's the assumption. And they even say, like, even with Andrew's parents, you don't know how much time they have. I tried to look up and see if they're still alive, but I can't find. They were alive in 2020. I can't find out anything else about them. I saw some funny things when I just searched it, like in the Google search, if they're still alive. And some of the questions were like, why is Dear Zachary sad? Dear Zachary, the ending explained. And I'll never understand the ending explained for 95% of the movies we watch. They're not that confusing. Like, okay, I can understand if it's ambiguous and you just kind of want to know what the hell other people are thinking or if there were clues you missed. But this is pretty fucking straightforward as to what happens. So I don't know what the ending explained means.
Like, wait, so is she alive at the end of the movie?
What happened? They were really vague about that, I think. Yeah, they have to do all this weird custody shit. She eventually gets out of jail because her case is, I don't know the technical terminology for it, but like it's past the time that it should have been decided upon, which I don't really 100% understand, because if the case is ongoing and it just keeps getting like postponed, you would think that it would have to be within the time frame that it started, but I don't know the law, and I don't know the Canadian law. I do know that there's a parliament. I know there's like 400 members, and they have to decide on shit. I don't really know much more than that. They said that they're slow, and you know what? They are slow, but so are we. We're not. I don't think the United States is much faster at anything that we need to do. A lot of our big national cases that you think like, oh, they're going to expedite it, and they supposedly do. You're talking like 2 years after it happened before there's a trial or anything. But I get wanting to be fair. I did like in this documentary too when he couldn't get interviews from a lot of the people that essentially fucked up and helped this lady get out of prison. He like digitally motioned their mouth to move, and then he read statements that they made, like official statements that they made in court or whatever. So like her attorney, I can't remember who the one person is reading the bylaws of child custody thing.
It's like her lawyer, and then somebody that's like a higher up. Like I don't think they're. I think they might technically be a judge or something like that. The one woman.
Yeah, it makes me think of something from South Park or something. Like it's like the lowest skill of animation with the context. But I think that it works. It doesn't really bother me. Unlike the rest of the stuff, it's relatively short. You never, because it's his voice, there's almost like a second that you're like, don't even realize that person's fucking mouth is moving like it's supposed to be them speaking. But yeah, there's all tons of weird shit. But yeah, they were showing videos of him with Zachary with his grandma, and like how he kept choosing her over Shirley. I don't know why they would keep rubbing that in her face, because there's like, it seems like there's like 20 shots of the baby Zachary just going towards her instead of Shirley, and all Shirley's like,
there was a problem.
Yeah, the baby is like, no, please no, don't have me around this woman. I'm gonna recommend right now, if you didn't see the documentary, I would probably watch it first before continuing any further on this podcast, because it is spoiler heavy, but I think that it kind of is worth going into as blind as possible. I know that we set up probably the first 30-40 minutes of the documentary. That might be spoilerish, but it's the end that it starts to become the more impactful thing, which is Shirley takes off with this baby Zachary, and she commits a murder-suicide by drowning the baby, well, doing drugs and drowning the baby, her and the baby. And she's having like another relationship that's very similar to what was happening with Andrew, where it's like, she's so fucking crazy, like the guy needs to distance himself from her, And I think in the documentary they say that she tried to set it up to make it look like he murdered them, which again, I think she is crazy, but she's not a very intelligent person for being a doctor because everything she does in the whole documentary is just fucking stupid. Like they did the autopsy. They know how these people died. They're going to know what happened. That is just like, I think the biggest gut punch in this whole movie. Well, it is the biggest gut. I don't even think it's I don't think it's debatable. It probably is the biggest gut punch. It is the biggest gut punch in this movie because, like you said, it's that time. It becomes a time capsule to this kid, and now this kid has also been murdered by this woman, and now it becomes a documentary about how the fuck did this even happen? Why did this happen? And what can we do to change it so that it doesn't happen again? Andrew's dad, David, and he's talking about, like, he has, like, fantasies about murdering her that he wished that he would have done beforehand, where he was going to, like, drug his wife so she couldn't be an accomplice and just straight up go murder Shirley in the middle of the night one night. So if he got caught, then Zachary would still have a parent figure. It's pretty fucked up. And then there's like even that shot too when he's talking about it. Their pastor or their priest, and his reaction just like, holy shit. And it's like, did you just tell you just told the priest what that guy said and then had like that quick reaction and then just go back into the story?
Yeah,
unless it's a little dishonest.
We get that weird moment of like, yeah, everyone involved in the case has something strange that they do, like that judge that like helps her write an appeal to get her out of jail from like his sentence that he gave her, which makes zero sense, or her therapist that like pays most of the bail for her the first time, like just out of nowhere, he's just like, sure, I'll pay for it, and it's like later we find out like people were like, I don't know, it seems like he was doing something a little bit odd, a little bit shady.
Every time they showed him, I thought of Jeff Goldblum, and I was like, if this was a live act, if this was if they did a reenactment, or
he'd be that guy.
They did a movie, it'd have to be Jeff Goldblum. That's just who he seemed like. But yeah, I mean, this movie does have nice moments for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe tops, when it's like this essential love letter to this kid, and then yeah, just goes fucking crazy. I really do like how we see all these interviews early, and there's these people that are talking to Zachary, and they're saying things like, hang in there, we're there for you, kind of typical shit like that. And then, you know, at the very end of the documentary, it's like where it changes again, and Kurt's like, this is actually really for Kate and David, and they start replaying some of the stuff that the people were saying, and it kind of fits perfectly into that puzzle piece that's their life, that it's can be for them. So I think that's another really interesting thing about this documentary, is how, like, when we were talking about Errol Morris, and he shifts the story, like he keeps finding what the story of the documentary needs to be, but we only get what the end result was. And then in this documentary, we get the shifts. We get every time the story changes and it goes in another direction. It just goes off here, goes off there. I kind of like that natural approach to this.
It feels like they put I don't know, like a bait or a fake out in the movie. There's like that one guy that's his friend or relative that's talking to like a young kid that seems like he would be Zachary's age, but they don't say his name, and he's telling him things about like, that's Andrew and he was killed, and it's like it's almost like making you think that that's Zachary, and they just like they can't interview him because he's only like 5, and then when it gets to the end and it's like, no, she killed him, I was like, oh, that other kid was just that couple's random kid.
Yeah, I like that one couple that became friends with Kate and David in Canada. And they're like, we'd go to church with them because people would think that Zachary was our kid and we were just like bad parents since we never did anything with the kid. Like it was like we left them with our parents or something. We know that's what it looked like whenever we went out with them. Yeah, I don't know.
I think of all the interviews.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think of all the interviews, though, I do like, almost kind of like when you're talking about the shifts, I do love the interviews with the parents. Because, like, the dad will just go, like, throughout the movie, they'll both be real calm, and then out of nowhere be like, that bitch! She ruined my life! And he just goes off, and they, like, immediately calms back down, and he's like, you know, I mean, I guess that's just what happens, you know, stuff like that, you know, this is what happens when somebody gets murdered, and then he's like, I should have killed that fucking bitch!
Yeah, he does. It's just like these outbursts of rage, and I honestly think the moment that when they talk about that Zachary has died, they include an outburst from him, and I think it's more jarring than being given the information that we're given.
Yeah,
it's just fucking crazy. But yeah, he is like that fucking stupid bitch. I killed her. And
yeah, it feels like.
And then even
any other documentary would have been like, maybe we'll cut that, and he's like, nope,
yeah,
that's a real reaction. That's going in the movie.
And that's what I was saying. Like that is something that it's visceral seeing that guy. It's very emotional hearing that. I think that's what makes it more impactful. I'd actually be interested because I think it's like NBC, MSNBC bought this and they aired it. So I wonder what the aired version's like because I only ever watched the actual version.
It's all bleeped.
Yeah, they just bleep them out, or they just keep. I would almost want to keep it if it's like you know what I mean? Like, I know the news would bleep somebody out, but I don't know. And then there's that part too where they're playing some of the messages where they're recording Shirley, like I said, for the custody battle, and the first couple that you hear, like, it's very unnerving just to hear Shirley talk because she's just it doesn't even sound like she's got a personality to her.
She keeps telling them that like they need to work on their issues with their son being dead. She's like, I feel like that's something that you need to get therapy for, like before we can talk again. Like I don't know why you're so upset about this.
Yeah, you're just gonna have to get over it. And then she starts asking questions like, "What was Andrew like at this age?" It's like, are you fucking like, yeah, you are crazy. But I brought it up because I like when you hear David talking on the recording, and he's like, basically, he doesn't swear, but it's like, listen here, bitch, we're doing what we have to do to deal with you. We're gonna do everything that we can for Zachary, but we don't fucking like you. We'll drop off food and diapers if you need food and diapers. He's not going without food and diapers. But yeah, that's like the closest you get to it. But I mean, yeah, he has that John Q, take it into your own hands type of feeling, and they trusted the law. They trusted that things are going to work out for them. They tried to do it legally, and I feel like if somebody killed somebody that close to me, you know, I'd probably think the same thing. I'd be like, how he's like, I probably can't get away with it, so at least I cannot incriminate my wife too. Yeah. In the little epilogue thing, they were talking about how David wrote a book. This documentary, he tried to make it as complimentary to the book as possible. I haven't read it. He tried to get this into like Toronto Film Festival, and they said no, and Sundance, and they said no. And I think he got it into the Slam Dance, and only like a few people showed up. But then MSNBC bought it, and then they tried getting it to Parliament for Parliament to see. And they said like of the 400 members that they have, like 30 showed up tops. I think they got like the attention of 2 of them, and the 2 of them were like trying to figure out how they could amend the law to make things safer. And I believe that the law that eventually got passed, because he made DVD copies for all of Parliament to watch, basically says if you're like alleged of a like murder, then you can't have custody of a child. There was some kind of wording where they didn't want to take away the power of a judge, but that is something that like a judge kind of wouldn't have a say in. So like a limiting of the power. I also was mighty impressed by it's in the actual documentary, but that guy that writes the review on the case to make a case for how the law needs to change. You can look these up and you can read them online if you want to. But when they show David showing up because they said Kate like fell and hurt herself or something so she couldn't go, he gets this huge fucking packet that is like 2 massive books wrapped in plastic. And I'm like, holy shit, how many pages is that?
Oh, yeah,
the 2 of them combined. The guy's report, and he wrote 2 fucking books, basically.
It's like as thick as the JFK report.
Yeah, he wrote over 1,000 pages. The one's like 550, and the other one's like 400 and something. So it's like 30 pages over 1,000. And I'm like, holy fuck, like, Jesus Christ. I don't know how these people do this. Do they not go back and proofread anything? Like, I could probably do that if I didn't proofread, like if I just continued to be like, I'm just going to keep writing every thought and feeling that I have and I'm never going back. Or do you hand it off the sun? Like, I don't know. It's just insane. But I would almost feel like I'd see that book like, I'm glad you put the time into this, but who's going to fucking read this much shit? But then I take that back because there's people that, like, that's what they live for. They're not reading books. They're reading the report first. Or, I mean, like, personally in their career, they're like, I'm interested in what this person's saying. And then they read, thousands of pages, and they're like, interesting, and move on to the next thing. But, yeah, this documentary sticks with me. I know it is depressing, and it's probably easily the most depressing thing that we'll ever talk about on the podcast because, A, being real, and how emotional it is. But yeah, it sticks with me. It's just fucked up. But that's not the reason I like the movie so much, is I think that the storytelling is interesting. It feels like you're remembering Andrew. Just that aspect alone, I think, adds something interesting and unique to it that you don't really see often. And in the beginning, I felt like maybe he was trying too hard, the documentarian. I don't know. After like 10 minutes, I'm vibed into this documentary and was so into the story. Plus, it used its time better than, the 2-hour Datelines that I usually watch. Did you watch this before? Did I make you watch this years ago?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you told me about it when we worked at Hollywood Video the first time.
There's a few people that I've showed this to.
I don't think I watched it at your house. No, I think you just told me about it.
Yeah. I actually thought Hollywood Video had like 1 copy of that movie, and I swear I had it. I thought I bought it, but I didn't because I was like,
might have bought it.
Maybe. I'll have to ask Jeremy. Jeremy would have bought that. I was like, I thought I had this movie because a few years ago, well, I say a few years ago, probably 10 years ago, my friend Jeff was over, and I was like, let's watch a movie, and that's the one I picked, and we watched it. I have to own it. I swear I have this on DVD. And I looked, and I don't have it at all. And I'm like, were we literally scrolling through Netflix, or it's on Amazon's where I watched it now. Did we just see it on Netflix? I'm like, yeah, that's the movie we're gonna watch tonight. Like, where did that come from? But if you like true crime, it's a very interesting case. It kind of glosses over the stuff that you're used to, and gets into the stuff that you don't get too often. Like I said, I watched Datelines, and everyone's like, they had a smile that filled the room, and everyone has nice things to say about Andrew. They do. But I like the more personal stuff where it's like, he liked beer. I got his last beer. The one guy that's like, the only thing we had in common was our photography. And Kurt's like, what? And I think that's cool that they include some of his photography in it that he didn't know that he did. Which I think is an even cooler reason for doing the documentary. Like, you're hearing all these stories about your friend, and you're obviously learning way more about this person than you ever knew in your entire life. Highly recommended. I think I saw that it was on Tubi or something too, so it's pretty accessible.
Next week, like you said, we're getting a little more fun talking about.
We're getting just a tiny bit more fun.
Just a little bit more fun. Talking about the musician Frank Zappa.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm watching the right Zappa.
It's the one that's directed by Bill.
I figured, and you met him, so you have lots of stories to tell. Yeah, we'll have to share that picture.
Yeah, I met all the Lost Boys just saying, Bill, I love Zappa too.
Bill, yep.
Yeah,
And that'll be next week. My boy Alex. My boy Alex did this. He's either Bill or he's a documentarian filmmaker.
That's it.
I think. That's it. Yeah, that's when you met him, I hope you were like, Zappa, man. That was a good one. That's a good documentary. Half the time I get lucky just speaking into my remote, like, I'll just say the title of the film and they'll be like, it's on Amazon.
Yeah.
It's on Amazon for rent. And I'll be like, wonder if it's on Netflix.
Pay an extra.
Yeah, I gotta find, like, well, the worst thing is, like, we've had people too where they're like, I rented this movie for $4, but then you find out it's on a fucking streaming service that you absolutely have, and you're like, really? I paid that when, I mean, I know that it's not a lot, it's a reasonable amount for a rental, but like, I'm already paying for it. And we'll be back for that, and then we're gonna have a special episode that should come out after that, but I don't know. Maybe if it's prepared beforehand, I'll release it a little bit earlier. But it's not a documentary. It is not a documentary. It's just an extra little bonus thing for something that has recently come out in the movie theater. So you fucking figure out what movie that's gonna be. I bet you wouldn't. You're not even gonna have a clue. But we're Cinema d'Amore. We'll see you next week. Bye. We are Cinema d'Amore. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter to stay up to date with news and information on upcoming episodes. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Pandora, Alexa, or iHeartRadio. It would be greatly appreciated if you subscribe to our podcast on your platform of choice. We also appreciate feedback, so rate us, review us, and let us know what you think. And above all else, thank you for listening.
That bitch! She ruined my life. I should have killed that fucking bitch.